Welcome to Ed Talks. My name is David Slomp. I'm Board of Governors Teaching Chair at the University of Lethbridge. And with me today is Dr. Janay Nugent, who is the incoming Board of Governors Teaching Chair at the University of Lethbridge. Welcome, and congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you.
To the teaching chair. Yeah. Could you maybe just begin by describing for us what your area of teaching and research is here at the University of Lethbridge?
I am a historian, so I'm in the history department. I study a time period known as early modern Europe, which is my research area is about 1560 to about 1700 or so, and I'm interested in Scotland in particular. I'm interested in sort of the cross-section between religious history and social history. Right. So how this time was a period where the Reformation happened, the whole country was changing its religion from Catholicism to Calvinism, and my interest is how does this actually affect people's day-to-day lives, how do people respond to that, how do they shape the Reformation, and how it's going to sort of evolve. So that's my research area. So from that, there's not a huge call for a wide swath of Scottish history classes. I do get to teach some Scottish history. Scotland appears in a lot of my classes, but I teach more broadly in that time period and along those different themes. And so I teach a first year Western Civ class, which I really love teaching the first years. It's a lot of fun. I teach a second year British history survey. In the third years, I teach in early modern Britain, a witch hunts in early modern Europe. I'm quite interested in gender history as well, and sort of the intersections of power, so age, social status, those sorts of questions. So the witch hunts is part of that discussion. A course on the Reformation, and at a fourth year level, I have 3 classes. I teach Scotland. That's where my Scotland class comes in. Early modern Scotland. I teach a class on youth culture in early modern Europe, and then another one on the family in early modern Europe as well. So.
What drew you into this area of work?
I kind of just fell into it. I mean, I grew up in southern Alberta, and I had so many people from different religious backgrounds, and I was always very interested in religious history and sort of, what are the differences, and how are they distinct, because people really identify with their churches, and so the religious history was something that always really called to me. I was very, very interested in learning more and more about that. But I'm also not, political history is fine. It's important to know the context of what's going on around you. But I like to know what's going on with the people. Like, how are they responding to it? How do they shape that society? Because you can have top-down processes, but people have to buy into it. So how does that process actually happen? And so I was quite interested in it. Scotland was a complete accident. Being from southern Alberta, I wanted to live in Ontario for a couple of years, and I ended up at the University of Guelph, and my supervisor said to me, why don't you try these Scottish sources? And I said, okay, I'll read them, and they're totally fascinating. And so I got drawn in, and now it's become my kind of adopted country. I really love it. There's a lot of parallels between Scotland and Canada in a lot of ways. It's the less sort of fabulous northern neighbor, to the great superpower to the south, and there's a lot of sort of similarities that I can kind of identify with, and so and the people in Scotland are awesome. It's a very fun, vibrant culture. So
do you go back and forth to Scotland often?
I do. I generally go about once a year to do research in the archives and to go to conferences and meet with my colleagues and that sort of a thing. So.
I've been thinking more and more I have to find more exotic connections to my research.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking I need warmer connections, but no, it's fun. It's good.
When you're working with undergrads, what are some of the things that you're hoping to achieve in your teaching of history?
This has taken me a while to sort of evolve my philosophy about what I want to do. History traditionally, and people often when they think about history, they think dates and places, and you're just memorizing facts. And that wasn't exactly how I was taught in my undergrad at all. We were much more about detail-oriented and understanding the context and becoming good writers and creating a good argument and really good transferable skills into life. And that's how I started out teaching history. But as I was going along, I started really focusing in on the fact that history has a lot to offer people as beyond sort of the traditional skill set. Really starting to think about and explore the ideas of citizenship, because understanding the broader context and the complex contributing factors to where we are in society, how we got there, really will allow us to develop a much more sort of comprehensive picture of the issues that face our society, and probably much more effective solutions to those problems as well. And so I really want my students to be engaged in sort of thinking as citizens.
Right.
And so let's understand those complex contributing factors. The other thing that, especially with the social history, that I really like to do with my students is to have them try to crawl into the shoes of somebody else, especially, people who are long dead. It's easy, right, to sort of be like, oh, they didn't know anything, or we can forgive them because they were, they just didn't have that understanding or that context, and it's just the way that it was. But they often do things where you're like, well, why did they do the weird thing, right? And I want my students to be able to practice that skill of getting into somebody else's shoes, understanding their perspectives, and instead of dismissing it as something archaic or irrelevant or just ignorant, right? Is that they can really begin to understand, well, no, these people did these things for a particular reason. These are their contexts. This is the way that they thought about things, and therefore I can now understand that, because that's a great skill to have, right? Whether it's, in the workplace where you can understand your colleagues, your customers, whatever it is that you're doing, you can really understand what they want and relate to them on that level and respect them for it. That's a great skill, but also as citizens, right? Understanding those in our communities that might be a little bit different from us in terms of their backgrounds, their context, their way of thinking, their religion, their dress, whatever it is, right? So really having a respect and an ability to understand people. So that's what I really want my students to take away from history. Those are the two sort of big things. And of course all the great skills that come with it. You're good readers, you're great at articulating your ideas and arguing a point and helping people understand your point and that sort of a thing, good research.
How do you help students develop those, that kind of empathy or understanding? What are some of the things that you do to help build that?
Well, first off, I talk about it.
Right,
And so instead of, hoping the students make the leap, I tell them, like, this is my pedagogy. This is my teaching philosophy. This is what I'm trying to accomplish in this class. It's on my course outlines, it's in my course goals, it's a theme that I talk about throughout the entire class. This has taken me a while to develop this and to get to this point, but this is something where, I feel that this is where I want to be, right, in the classroom. And then the assignments and the conversations that we have, respect in the classroom is absolutely critical. No matter what the perspectives of the students are, let's have a conversation and see if you can convince us, because that's part of that historical skill. Debate me. Show me the evidence, right? Let's see if you can actually convince me of your perspective, but we're going to do it with respect, and we're going to understand each other, and we're going to understand where each other's perspectives are coming from, no matter where it is, right? And even if it's a perspective that maybe I don't agree with, right? It doesn't matter. I'm going to respect it. So creating that culture in the classroom is really, really important. Being open and articulate about it, and then the types of assignments that I do as well. So I do a lot of role-playing assignments, where students have to, get into the shoes of somebody from that time period, and either they write an assignment from that perspective, or they do a presentation from that perspective. Or I had a group assignment in my youth culture in early modern Europe last year or the year before, which was a ton of fun, where they had to work as a group to recreate a popular culture event from early modern Europe, and the students, like, they were doing humor that in our day and age is actually quite offensive, like in terms of, the treatment of animals and stuff like that, and how they thought about animals. But the students really, like the whole class was like getting this humor, and they were really getting into the perspective. And I'm like, oh, they really understand what's going on, right? But they have to treat it with, a respect. This is why they did these things that we now see as absolutely crazy and inhumane and all sorts of different things. So we need to understand it from that particular perspective, and 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 also, the other question in my youth culture class was, well, one of the things that we see is that, in that society, there's so much change going on, and we often think of young people as being powerless.
Right.
Well, actually, they had a lot of power.
Right.
And that's what I want, especially the younger students in my class, those in their late teens and early 20s, to realize that they do have power and they have a voice. And so, it just takes them getting involved and articulating it and using the skills that they have to, sort of present themselves or to contribute to a social issue or contribute to their communities, whatever it is that they want to do.
It strikes me as you kind of look at the public and the political discourse in our continent right now that these are skills that are just so lacking, but so critically necessary.
We're in a period of transition. Historians, I often think about how historians will, in 50 years, look back. What were the big trigger points in a changing society as we evolve from one era to a next? Because that's what historians, the big fundamental question we ask is, change, and how did it happen? Or was it continuity, and why did it stay the same? Right? So that's the big sort of question that we grapple with, and so we're always looking at those big evolving pictures. So when we talk about medieval, what are sort of the big political, social, religious, economic themes that happened during that time period? And then how do we change and transition into an early modern era and then a modern era, right? And so it feels like we're in one of those transition periods, and they don't happen overnight. You don't go to bed medieval one day and wake up early modern the next, right? These are processes, and so our students are navigating those changes. They're living in that changing world. It's affecting, their job opportunities, the types of jobs that they're going to have, how they're going to live their lives, and so they need to really be able to sort of have a broader perspective on that change, and then realize that the skills that they're earning in the university, they're about a good job. Without a doubt, you want them to have a good job. That's realistic. But it can take them a lot further than that as well. So, and that they can really contribute to and shape this changing society that we're in.
When you do your historical research and look at these kinds of periods in the past, what are some of the things that you've learned from that you would say are important things for us to hold on to as a society and a culture as we go through this period?
Okay, so I have personal beliefs in that, which I might share in the classroom, but I'd like students to come up with their own. But I think we often look back to the past as being, this ideal time, a utopian, wonderful past. But when you look at the past and you actually look at statistics and societies, you realize that some of those assumptions that we have are completely false. So, we live in a society where crime has taken over and, our violence rates are going way up. Well, historians have shown that homicide rates were actually much higher in, say, the 16th, 17th centuries than they are today. And so, or this ideal society of the 1950s, right? Well, in those societies, the home was not necessarily a haven, right? This is a place where if there's abuse or addictions or violence or whatever is going on, that's quiet and nobody intercedes, right? And so people have to grow up in that sort of a thing. So, idealizing the past is a problem. And trying to look back to the past as though this was when things were really good, because we tend to remember the good things that we want to remember or the really bad, right? Even in our own lives. And so to idealize something is not true to it. And so I think that that's a bit of a problem.
Kind of shift gears a little bit. In your new position as Board of Governors Teaching Chair, the board chair position was created to help provide some leadership with the teaching center at the university, the advisory council that helps to guide the work of the teaching center and to provide some form of leadership across the institution around teaching excellence. What's some of the work that you've been doing? I know you've been involved with the teaching center for some time already in other capacities, but what's some of the work that you've been doing on those fronts already at the university?
I was a teaching fellow for 2 years, and for that I was involved in a couple of main projects. And so one of the projects was a very functional, practical sort of gathering up of resources to create a document for incoming instructors that gives them resources on campus. And encourages them and lets them know that, teaching excellence is something that we want to support, and here are the different places that you can go to sort of pursue that. And so, because we have a wide variety of different instructors on campus. There's, the tenure track ones, which people kind of associate with the university, but there's also, graduate students, postdocs, there's contract work, whether it's a year contract, a half a year contract, a 3-year contract, and then there's sessionals who come in just for a course here or there, or may only come in for one course, and it's a lot to take in. It's a big institution, there's a lot of policies in play, and so to come in and just to have a how-to guide. So that was one of the projects that I did. The other one that I was involved in was the project on space. So there's the LEE project, which is the Learning Environment Evaluation team in the Teaching Center, and they have been doing phenomenal work there along since started before I ever came around. I was just lucky enough to get to work with them. They're looking at our environment, which actually is a cross-section of some of my research questions, so I think that's why it talks to me so much. But it's about teaching space on campus, and so I don't know how much of this space you can see on the camera, but we're in a lecture room right now, and this is sort of a traditional space, and it has its purpose. It's great. I lecture my first year class a lot, but it's the main type of space that we have for teaching on campus. There are so many other types of teaching that one can do, and so they're kind of looking at the space to say, how can we provide the space that allows instructors who want to do other things than just lecturing to do those different things. And so I am a huge fan of the Scale Up classroom, which is a flipped model classroom. I don't do a true flipped model. So the flipped model is the idea is that the students will get the lecture material either through video or textbook reading or whatever it is beforehand, and then when you come to class, the instructor is working with you hands-on to work through problems. I don't do a true flipped model because I still do some lecturing, but I do a lot more with student engagement. And so I like them to be able to participate in the creation of course materials, in the lecture materials. I want them to discuss with one another. It's an important critical skill to be able to have those conversations, to work in a team environment, to sort of, again, keep practicing those respecting each other's ideas and working through that in the classroom. And so lecture theater is not very conducive to that. And so the Scale Up classroom is one of the ways that they've done. They've got a new classroom that they are just unveiling this fall. That's the Socratic Seminar Room, and I got to see that last week, I think, and it's beautiful. It's so exciting. And so it's a big table, so the sight lines are really good, and you can sit in the room, and it's quite functional. The chairs are on rollers. You can break into smaller groups. You can be in a big group. You can have these conversations where you're looking at each other, and you're equals in the room. Again, developing that respect, that ability to converse with other people, try to understand their perspectives, try to debate yours, practice that skill, of convincing people of your ideas and your perspectives, and really working through complex ideas, right? And so space is really important. And in my research, I'm quite interested in space as well, because we have these built environments, and we are, you go into a church and you're supposed to sit in the pew, and you're supposed to look at the front of the church, and there's someone who's of the, authority at the front of the room that you're listening to. Classrooms, same idea, but not spiritual, obviously. Well, I guess it could be, but typically not. And, and that's how we are meant to behave in those environments. But in my time period, what I look at is, did people were they sheep? Did they go in and just listen? Because their religions were changing. And so how did they respond to that? How did they act? Did they always do that? And in fact, the way that people use space is a way for them to have a voice and to assert their own opinion into things. So they'll take that space and sort of manipulate it for their own means. And so I think that space on campus is really, really interesting. And so that's what I want to sort of investigate a bit more and see. Informal learning space is kind of a buzzword in education right now, and I am interested in that informal learning space. So it's not just the classroom; it's where students, they're in a campus community. They spend a lot of hours on campus. How can we bring the learning out into that space? So we have Starbucks popping up around campus and stuff like that, and it's more comfortable, and it's meant to be environments where students can have informal conversations and that sort of a thing, which is great, and I really like that. Can we continue to evolve that? Is what I'm interested in part with the teaching chair. So where can we bring our learning into that space? So a couple of examples would be, there's some really interesting projects from the community. So again, going back to that citizenship and community, how can we bring that to students on class and classes that maybe aren't going out into the community and being engaged in community and that sort of a thing? Well, it would be great if we could bring some of those projects that are happening in classrooms and display them on campus. Ask questions that are raised from those particular projects that are happening in the classrooms, and bring them beyond just those 20 students that are in that room, right? Try to bring them to the broader campus community, get people interested in the types of questions that are being asked, and helping them realize that there are so many opportunities that being a student on campus offer you. So it's important to be in class, it's important to do your work so that you can learn your skill sets. But to me, an education is much bigger than that. So hopefully students will, come in and, want to be involved and engaged in what's going on campus, be involved in student clubs, be involved in the events that are happening and the issues that they're engaging in, try to be involved in the community, volunteer projects, and try to maybe get involved in some of the issues that are facing our community, become engaged citizens. They can do that through applied studies, they can do that through classes that actually already engage in that sort of an idea. So that's, I want to look around campus and see if there's some spaces that might be conducive to that as well. And then helping the teaching center in whatever they're doing when they call on me. So for some of the space issues that they're interested in as well. I believe community engagement is really, really important. And, there's a lot of social justice projects that are happening, a lot of classes that are involved in that sort of a thing. So it'd be nice to bring those findings to the wider community. And again, to show students that they can be active and engaged and they have a voice and they can make a difference. So.
Yeah, space is it's a challenge as an instructor. I remember teaching my first hybrid online face-to-face course.
Oh yeah.
And as I was planning the course, being very cognizant of, I'm not going to let the space define the practice.
Right.
But it takes an enormous amount of energy to figure out if there's a certain way you like to teach, a certain style that you believe is important, to not just devolve to a lecture only type of style because the platform you're working in seems to want that. And it's a real challenge. Do you look at space in terms of online space?
Yeah, that's interesting because I've once taught an online course, and honestly, I did not like it. No. Like, it's hard. I mean, I like the students. I like, the face-to-face interactions and being able to read their expressions and really engage and to make sure, because tone and body language are so important. We misunderstand each other in a digital world so easily. Text messages are misunderstood, emails, the tones are misunderstood, that sort of a thing. Whereas in a classroom, when you're trying to build that respect and be like, I understand by me looking at you in the eye and nodding and respecting what you have to say. It's difficult to do that on an online platform, and so I struggled with that a lot. And I have to say, I was like, oh, phew, done that. Not going back. So luckily, I haven't had to teach any online, and I don't see it in my future. But who knows? So no, I haven't done that, but it's really interesting. So I should talk to you about it though to see if there's something that we could do.
But I like you, try to avoid teaching online because it's not a comfortable space for me.
Yeah.
I like a very relational kind of classroom, the very things that you talked about, where you can look people in the eye, where you have those interactions and you build your practice around that. And I just find it very difficult to create that kind of environment in an online space.
Yeah.
You know, and that. So I think I'm looking more for answers and help than offering any sorts of wisdom other than
Right.
I know this doesn't work.
We'll have to see where this evolves to, and if someone comes forward. I mean, there are some really good people who teach online, right, on campus, and so maybe they'll want to be engaged too, depending on how the project evolves. I mean, I'm at the very early stages, so I'll have to see what happens. We have the new School of Liberal Education that is has just been launched, and so that's a great platform possibly to bring together the different places on campus for a conversation about these sort of things, especially because one of I should stop and explain what liberal education means. So it's not, meaning like left-leaning education. Liberal education literally means to free the mind, and it's meant to be. It's a 2,000-year-old sort of term, I believe. And it's meant to be on our campus as our foundational philosophy is to be a liberal education institution. It's our 50th anniversary. We've heard a lot about it over the last little while, and we've had a revitalization of it on campus. And liberal education has a number of pillars, and it's meant to include things like citizenship, engagement in community. It's meant to also be multidisciplinary. So you don't just focus in on biology or neuroscience or history or whatever as your focus, but you try to look at a variety of different perspectives from the humanities, from the social sciences, from the sciences, from the natural world, from social structures to what it is to be a human being, right? And so the problems that face our world, if we have a variety of perspectives as we are trying to engage in them, this will create a much more well-rounded citizen and a well-rounded employee and all of these different things. And so that's the philosophy in a very nutshell of liberal education. And we will produce students who are much more flexible and adaptable to a constantly changing job market and a constantly changing environment. And so that's sort of the philosophy behind liberal education. And it's meant to bring together all of the different faculties on campus, all the different perspectives and ideas. And so this might be a good place to begin to look at how we might engage in some of these ideas even more.
I've been doing a number of these ed talks, so I've been able to talk to great educators in the hard sciences and in the social sciences and in mathematics, some of the applied areas like nursing and that. And what strikes me as common among many of the people I've been able to talk to through this series is that there seems a perception that learning at the university is about developing sort of deep disciplinary knowledge in specific areas. But so many of the great teachers I've been talking to recognize that there's importance in that. But when they talk about what really matters to them, it's about a different set of skills, a broader set of skills that are connected to things like citizenship or success in life beyond learning. Does that ring true for you as well in your own practice, in your own thinking about liberal education and the university's branding of itself as a liberal education institution?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I did my undergrad here, and so I'm a product of the liberal education training. Some of the, the really big proponents of lib ed were my instructors. And so, I believe in this philosophy wholeheartedly. When I went off to grad school, I remember teaching a course and asking, okay, well, that's an interesting perspective from a historian. What would the anthropologist say? And everybody looked at me and said, what? And I'm like, okay, well, what about, the gender scholars? And they all looked at me and said, what? And I was like, wait a minute, do you guys not take classes outside your discipline? And they're like, no. And I was like, what? Okay, well, let me give you some ideas. And they all went, wow, because it gives you so many more perspectives about, the way that people are thinking and the problems that we have. So again, these complex approaches to problems. And, it's really important. The disciplines, there's a lot to be said for a deep disciplinary knowledge because that allows you to really engage. And I'm a big proponent as well of students pursuing their passion because it doesn't matter if your degree's in biology or history or anthropology, in my opinion, in terms of the job market, because the skills that you are bringing out are pretty much the same. And so if you're going to learn those skills, you need to be passionate about your topic. So pick the topic that you're passionate about, engage in those courses deeply, and then you will learn those skills. And then you can take them out because they are transferable skills, right? If you're in a professional discipline, that's different. Like you're learning specific professional, knowledge that you need to take into the world. But if you're doing a general Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Science, those skills are very, very transferable. Often parents think, well, I don't want to pick on anybody in particular, but this sounds like it's more employable, so you should go and do that. When really, what's going to make you a really good employee and allow you to rise up the ranks is if you've got that skill set as a solid foundation. And so if you're taking something that you're not really interested in, you're only half-hearted about it, you're not going to develop that skill set in the same sort of a way. So so deep disciplinary knowledge is good because that allows you to really engage and develop that skill set in a way that's effective. I like the liberal education because then you get to play with that deep disciplinary knowledge, right, from a variety of perspectives, and it allows you to be that much more flexible than someone who's only been looking at their disciplinary perspective. So.
And I think a lot of the problems that we're facing in society, culture, science today are really inherently multidisciplinary problems, right? That in some ways a lot of the pure disciplinary work is done in many respects, and now it's about thinking across these disciplines and developing insights in those ways.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I mean, all the studies that are coming out, if you read wherever you want to read, they're all showing that flexibility, right, is what is going to allow people to be successful, especially in 10 years when I can't even remember what huge percentage of jobs haven't even been yet created that will exist in 10 years, 60%, 70%. I don't know, I've seen different statistics on that. So how do you prepare for that job? You be flexible and you have a really great transferable skill set.
I do a lot of work in the area of transfer in terms of writing development and that. And the research shows us that we actually do quite a poor job overall in terms of helping students develop transferable skills, specifically in the field of writing anyways.
Right.
What are the challenges or opportunities that you see around helping students develop transferable knowledge? How do you go about building that kind of capacity in students?
I know it's hard, right? And because we all know that the skills that should come from what we're teaching. But I really believe a lot of it is about awareness. And it's about being open with these conversations in the classroom. My students, any of my students who might watch this that I've had in the last 3-4 years as I've developed this philosophy will be like, oh yeah, she goes on and on about this stuff in the classroom, right? And it's important because they need to recognize, first off, what those skills are and why they're important, and then how it is that pedagogically each assignment or project in the class or conversation that we're having contributes to the development of those skills, right? And so, because if you're not aware of what you're doing or why you're doing it, I'm in that class because history's kind of cool because all these weird things happened and it's just really fascinating, which is great. And I'm glad that people like that about history and that's great about it. But the History Channel and historical movies and all those different things make people gravitate towards history. But in the classroom, when you're earning a degree, right, that degree means something. And it's because you're developing a skill set, not just because you learned a bunch of cool historical things that you could have done by watching the History Channel, right? May or may not have been but you want to take that history, and then be able to actually develop those skills.
Yeah.
And so if you're not aware of what you're doing, it's really, really tough. And I mean, when that was not the culture or the environment that I had as an undergrad, and and I remember coming out and thinking, who's going to want to hire a history major? And then getting into the workplace and realizing, oh wait, this skill and that skill, and I can convince people of what I need them to do, and then I can I have some control over my job, and I can start to really thrive as an employee, right? And you can work your way up as a valuable employee very quickly. It's hard to get your foot in the door, absolutely. But once you're there, 10 years in, if you look at the statistics of grads 10 years in and how successful they are with the general level education, they are successful. It's a struggle to begin, but once they're in, So I think that again, that's part of it, and trying to just convince them that it's worth it, especially with writing. Writing is hard because writing takes a lot of time on the students' part, but also on our part, and trying to grade it and correct it and help them to develop it further. And we're all very overstretched with an awful lot of hours. 60-hour work week is a pretty standard number of hours, and so to try to do one-on-one writing with every single student is a very, very challenging thing. So one of the things our department's done is we've created a writing tutorial group, and so the grad students work with them, and so I'll often have my students do at least a second draft that way. They have to go to the graduate students first to get the feedback, and I give the graduate students a list of things that I want to make sure that they comment on, and then they have to revise, and then if they do that, then they might get a couple % bonus or something like that, right? So trying to convince them to spend the time to start early. They're all busy. We're all busy. Like everybody's busy, and so procrastination or even prioritization, right? Whatever's on fire right now that you have to put out, everything else can wait. Trying to convince students to start in the semester earlier, to come up with multiple drafts, to come see me, to come see the tutors, to do that sort of a thing, so that they can really develop their writing. I really do, when I look at students that I have in first year to students I have in fourth year, maybe they're not the perfect writers by fourth year, but boy, have they improved their skill set. So
the transfer challenge in writing that we're looking at in the field of writing studies is, how do you learn as a student what makes a good history paper versus what makes a good biology paper versus what makes a good philosophy paper, in that. And we do a good job, I think, of teaching students as history majors what it means to write well in history. But to take what they've learned about how to learn how to write in history and apply it to how to learn how to write in other areas seems to be an area where we haven't been doing as great a job at this point, at least. The research is suggesting that.
Although I think that there's some similarities. No matter how you write, if it's for business or if it's for history or biology, write clearly, write concisely, and provide your evidence. Right? But but writing clearly and concisely is hard.
It is.
So.
And what counts as evidence differs from discipline to discipline.
And so that's where I think that's where the disciplinary perspective comes in.
And that's where learning how to figure out what does that look like in that discipline is a real challenge. You talked about the sort of culture shift in that, and it's interesting because I know when I was an undergrad, there was certainly an expectation that you're an undergrad, you don't really know a whole lot, so you're here to learn, you're here to absorb knowledge. And you're here to sort of replicate or pare it back in the sense. A lot of assignments I remember as a student were assignments that said, essentially you had X number of lectures, you were taught this specific disciplinary content, and now we want you to tell us how much of that you remember or can get back to us in that. Have you seen that in your own experience, that culture, and have you seen that shift in your own practice?
For sure. And you know what? And history, it matters because one of the skills for history is details and context. And so you have to be clear on your details, you have to be clear on your context in order to understand anything. and that I think is important in understanding our world,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
But so those things do exist, and it does matter.
Yeah.
Because I am somebody who does believe that content matters, right? But that being said, now I want you to do something with that.
Yeah.
Why do we care, right? You've got the context, you've got the details, which you need, because to me that's the evidence.
Right.
That's what you're providing to me is the evidence, the context, the background, to now make an argument about something else. How do I understand this society? How do I understand how people view religion, and how does society convince you to change your religion, right? I need to know those details, but then that's your jumping off point, right? And so if you can just give me the details, it doesn't mean a whole lot more.
When you look at the academy, teaching at the post-secondary level, where do you see opportunities for us to improve capacity, improve the student experience, to kind of build on liberal education, or the things that you've been seeing here?
Well, I mean, this is one of the things that I want to look at, right? In terms of space, I think there's a lot of different ways, and I think that the Teaching Center really engages in this, right? Trying to promote teaching excellence from a variety of perspectives. And so this is not the be-all and end-all answer, it's just a little piece of the puzzle. But this is by kind of engaging in space on campus and looking at space and seeing, not just the classrooms as your learning space, or the library as your learning space, right? But seeing the hallways and the alcoves and the nooks and all of those different places as opportunities to bring questions, to encourage discussion, to encourage debate, especially amongst students who are, sitting there in different majors. Have those conversations from a variety of perspectives, right, outside of the classroom. Some of my fondest memories as an undergrad and as a grad student are, in the pub with my colleagues, my student colleagues, and debating issues. Usually it was historians, but it was always really fun to bring in somebody from a different area and have those conversations. And I mean, even now my research is enriched by that, because I have colleagues that I work with from a variety of different disciplinary perspectives, especially from the child and youth studies area, and that enriches my research, and it makes me ask questions that go well beyond my discipline. And a lot of historians go, "Oh, wow, that's an interesting idea." Yeah, I know, I got it from the anthropologist, right? Or whatever. So I think that trying to bring that onto campus is really, really important. I also think that being really encouraging about community engagement, and being active in the community is something that's really important too. And I know that our institution, this is a priority, and that through the U Volunteer program and through this revitalization of liberal education and having citizenship is one of its 4 pillars. We really are promoting that, and I want to see how space can bring that in. So to bring it even more visible, because I mean, it's one thing for all of us faculty who are sitting in rooms and General Faculty's Council having these conversations, but now how do we bring it to as many students as possible? And I think that there are some people who do really, really well in the classroom, and to kind of promote that around campus in more visible ways is really a great perspective. So
you have 2 years as Board of Governors teaching chair.
Yeah.
They're going to go fast.
Yes.
Are there certain things you're hoping to achieve during your tenure as chair?
Yes. How concrete they are, I don't know yet, right? Again, I want to I want to support the Teaching Center as they're developing teaching spaces that are provide a breadth of opportunities for teaching philosophies on campus, because it really does make a big difference. If you've got the space that you need to teach. So I think that that's really, really important. So that's the one thing that I want to do. The other one is hopefully figure out some ways to get that engagement happening in spaces that aren't necessarily traditional teaching spaces. So those are the 2 things, and I don't know what that's going to look like at this particular point. I'm starting to have conversations with different people. One of the things that our campus is looking towards is how do we engage in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations. You know, I have a couple of ideas. It's a little premature for me to say right now what I, you know, one or two things, small itty bitty things that I might be able to contribute to that, you know, in terms of campus space and sort of making campus, the campus community want to be engaged in our own sort of contributions to the TRC. So, you know, that's something that I'm hoping I might be able to make a small contribution to in some ways. So,
yeah, that's an area where there's significant work ahead for all the institutions, post-secondary institutions.
Yeah, and I need to take my lead from a lot of other people.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. We have a strong connection with our Indigenous community here, which is a great place for us to start.
Yes, yeah. Well, and there's space again, right? Being on Treaty 7 territory, it's an important, it's very important to sort of bring that in our campus space. A greater recognition, I think, of that. So.
It strikes me as you're talking about the multidisciplinary nature of the work that you're doing, of the work you're doing with liberal education, that there may have been, you know, a good group of colleagues that you've worked with along the way as you've built your practice and your perspective on teaching. You know, who are some of the people that you've drawn on in your development as an educator?
So when I first started, I just always loved teaching. I love being in the classroom. I love interacting with the students and seeing them grow. Like, at my 4th years that graduated last convocation, I was just like, oh, they're like my children. Because the growth that they had from first year to 4th year was just amazing. Like, they just blew me away. And they're so engaged in their communities, and they're so, you know, dedicated to their discipline. And I mean, maybe they're not all A+ students. Don't need to be, right? And so I've always loved that. And so when I started, Sheila McManus in my department of history, who's a former Board of Governors teaching chair, and she was very influenced by Pat Chipchuk, who is now retired faculty, who was a 3M Teaching Award winner, which is a national teaching award, very prestigious. And so, you know, I spent a lot of time talking to Sheila, and she would go back to Pat, and you know, we would have these conversations. And you know, I've always been very interested in teaching through that. But in about 2010, 2009, somewhere in there, I also became connected with Jan Newberry. And she is an anthropologist. I guess that's why I keep using the anthropologist example. But she and I and a number of other people, Louise Barrett in psychology, Serge Pellis in neuroscience, Elizabeth Galway in English, and I'm probably forgetting somebody, but also Amy Van Hiking in education. We were involved in this interdisciplinary conference on child and youth studies, and subsequently founded the Institute for Child and Youth Studies on campus. And this is a very engaged group. Heidi McDonald, very, very important, and important in my department as well for all of my teaching ideas and bouncing ideas off of her from the early stage. But you know, this interdisciplinary group, and they're all very interested in teaching as well, and you know, different teaching philosophies and pedagogies, and trying different things in the classroom, right? And so through them, I was inspired to try a lot of different things. I came to a few of Jan's classes and had Louise into my class, and you know, I had different people that I would like watch, and they mentored me in my teaching, and you know, and I have to apply it for what works for my discipline, what works for me as a personality, you know, that sort of a thing. But they're very passionate about what they do, and they're just really willing to try different things and to really get engaged. And so that's been really, really important to me. They've all been important mentors. Michelle Hogue has been really important to me as well. I mean, I teach Scottish history, you know, or early modern European history. I don't really look at, this is the period of colonization, but I don't really do colonial history. And so, you know, how do I make FNMI issues important in my classes is important as well, because this is something that is very relevant in our society, very important on our campus. And so, you know, talking to her and learning how I can be an ally and how I can bring issues into the classroom in a respectful way has been really, she's been very important to me as well. And over the last 2-3 years, Shelley Wismith has become a really important mentor to me as well. She has been leading the liberal education revitalization team. I've come on board with that team in the last year and a half, but and her and Jan and Heather Moreau have all been really important in leading that charge on campus, and getting involved in that has been a lot of fun. And I've the Liberal Education 1000 class, I've been teaching half of the humanities section over the last year, and just really being able to be encouraged by Shelley to think about how does my discipline fit into this liberal education model that's on campus, and how can I bring that to the classroom, and you know, what does that mean for my students? And so she's been a great model, and she just won the 3M Teaching Award as well. So, you know, both of our 3M Teaching Award winners, the 2 in the university's history, have both influenced, you know, and been important mentors for me, and encouraging me to keep sort of striving for teaching excellence on campus. And, you know, I want to continue with that, and hopefully encourage somebody else, you know, on campus as well, and just to help in developing that culture even more thoroughly. I've been very lucky to work with the Teaching Center as well, and they've introduced me to the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, SOTL, and so that's kind of been a fun new research area for me. I haven't engaged in as fully as I would like to, but I'm hoping to continue moving forward in that as well. So doing some research on what are, you know, great teaching practices in a post-secondary environment. We always think about our research as being about that, whatever it is that your PhD is on, which of course is clearly very important, and everything else that you do comes out of that, right? But the really engaging and investigating teaching practices is really important for kind of developing these great teaching practices that go beyond depth of discipline, right? So what we've been talking about earlier, I think that is really important for us to have this, again, conscious conversation and a conscious investigation. Use those research skills we all have to begin to look at, you know, what makes for a good instructor, what makes for an effective instructor, so that we can produce students who skills are transferable, right? So that we can begin to figure out how to make that leap.
It's clear you invest a great deal in your teaching and your growth and development as an educator. What's motivated that?
A lot of different things. On a very basic level, I don't want to get bored, right? There's that. Because if I'm boring, or if I'm bored, then the students are going to be bored, and that's not going to be an effective teacher, right? But I'm also an idealist. My parents wouldn't think that they're idealists, and I'm not sure that they are either. But they always, you know, modeled this behavior that you must contribute to community and to society. You know, take what you've been lucky enough to be born with or achieve, and to give back. And that's something that, you know, I've done since I was a small child, volunteering with my mom on Meals on Wheels, you know, like everything, moving on. And I volunteered my whole life. I've been engaged in community my entire life. And I think that that's deeply satisfying. And, you know, and I want to continue with that, and I want to encourage other people to move forward. I think that the message of a university education, particularly by government, is, you know, your education is about getting a job. It's about getting that degree so that you can get a job, so you can fuel the economy. Sure. I don't disagree with that, but that sells education very, very short. And there's so much more that can happen. And when you're in such a vibrant institution and a vibrant culture where people are passionate about their topics and they're passionate about issues in society and those types of things, use that education to develop yourself fully as a well-rounded person, because well-rounded people are going to be better employees anyhow, but they're also going to make our communities better, our families better, our society better. They're going to make better leaders for tomorrow. Not everybody's going to be prime minister or an MP or whatever, right? But they will be leaders in their communities. And so that's what I want them to bring, is that breadth of perspectives, that sensitivity to ideas and cultures and respect for other people, and then take that skill set that they have and really make things better. Not just for themselves in their jobs, but more broadly.
For parents whose children are on the threshold of going to post-secondary, there's a real sense of faith, I guess, that has to come along with that, isn't there? Where we say, we're going to invest all this money, you're going to invest this time, and you might not know when you start where it's going to take you.
Right.
But we're going to trust that it's going to take you somewhere.
And
that's a big risk
it's
in many respects.
It's risky, it's a leap, right? And people want to know, having studied history, what are you going to do with a history degree? I don't know, right? And I don't know is actually the answer that most people should probably have when they finish their degrees, because how many times do people change their careers in a lifetime now? This comes from an older philosophy where, you got your job, and at the end of 25, 35, whatever years, you got your gold watch and you retired, right? That's not the reality of our world, and I know that it's a big leap. It's expensive, right? It's a huge commitment to not know quite what that's going to mean. And frankly, the degree will get you what you put into it. So if you spend the time to really develop that skill set, to engage yourself, to become a well-rounded citizen, to become involved in community, because being involved in community it's not just a feel-good thing. That creates networks for you. That creates lines on resumes, right? Like it makes you more marketable. Those are the types of things, they all work together to create a bright future, right? If you are in school, you only go to classes, you just put in the bare minimum to get your grades, your passing grades. If you, work 25 hours a week off campus at the same job in retail for your entire career, that does not create that same well-roundedness. You'll have your piece of paper at the end, but I'm not going to promise you that that's going to make you have a great future, right? So I tell students, C grades equal a C future, because your skill set, right? It's because you haven't developed that transferable skill set in the same way. It's not about the piece of paper. That's not what's going to make you well-rounded. And I know that is vague and it sounds very idealistic and all of the rest of it. But we just had, I coordinated a history homecoming weekend for the 50th anniversary. And so it was a group of alumni, current students, and the department. And we had over 100 people come, and our alumni are amazing, and it's those alumni who came back, and they have everything, market research companies to, marketing for international airport manager, to education librarians. So their breadth is all over the place. But they've all been successful, right, in what they've done, and their skill sets have transferred them everywhere. And those are all the people who are engaged, right? They're the ones who wanted to come back because they felt connected to this place and passionate about this place. But they were engaged, and they were all successul in their own ways and in their own directions. And so I encourage parents to read a little bit about what do people do with these degrees? Where do they end up? Because A plus B equals C is not necessarily, it's not a formula. I can't remember the statistic, but it's something like 60% or something like that of history grads end up in management, administration, those types of finance in those different areas. So that's not what you would think history would end up doing, but it's because those skill sets are so transferable. I encourage parents to look at what happens to people in their degrees. There's lots of literature out there. There's lots of research out there that will help you understand sort of what will happen. And I'm talking about history right now, but I strongly believe that that's the case for any of the non-professional programs in particular. So.
Yeah, even the professional ones, I think.
Even, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
Lots of people go to education and end up in very different fields.
Yeah.
As well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think this gets us to the end of our time. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences and your insights.
Thank you for having me. Look forward to working with you this
Yeah,
next
me
year.
too. Yeah.